Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So glad you made it right after lunch. At our age, this is typically our nap time. So if we start to fall asleep up here, please just come up and nudge us. We'll wake right back up. But we actually have one more panelist. He will be coming in here in just a second. And we'll introduce him, but he's coming from a different session, so he'll be joining us here in just a second. But my name is Jeff Waller. I'm with Waller Consulting, and we specialize in warehousing and distribution consulting, a lot of supply chain related activities, logistics network design, that sort of thing. This is not a commercial for Waller Consulting. That's who we are. This is Al Ritchie.
Hi guys, how are you? Thank you. I met some of you at the beginning. Thank you for attending. We appreciate you being here. We're looking forward to sharing this information with you.
Yeah, and our third panelist is Doug Cantriell. Doug is with Ford Motor Company, and he's also the keynote speaker tomorrow morning. So he will be joining us as well. Doug is a former Waller Consulting employee. Back in the day, and so he kindly has agreed to join us here in a minute. So what we're going to talk about today. So if 2025 and the last few years have taught us anything, supply chain risk is not going away, nor is it being reduced in any manner. If anything, supply chain risk is doing nothing but accelerating and increasing in our lives. And so what we're going to talk about today are, first of all, recognizing risk and what to do about it. So when we sat down to talk about what we wanted to discuss with you guys, we wanted to make sure it was something that was actionable, something that you could take back to your companies and implement and talk about with your group, right? So I've been to so many of these risk mitigation discussions that are all about theory and nothing about what can I do with it. And that's what we wanted to avoid with this. So we are going to talk about risk. We are going to talk about how to recognize risk. But most of all, and most importantly, what to do to prepare yourself to mitigate risk. And so that's going to be the focus of the session today. There's Doug right there. we were just talking about you, Doug.
It was all good.
All right, so we're just getting started, and good to see you.
Man, I've seen you.
Yeah. So here's kind of the agenda for today, right? So first of all, we're going to talk about understanding risk. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because you probably already know it, but just to clarify, the types of risks and how to do and to start assessing those risks, which is the first step really in making a plan to mitigate those risks. Supply chain disruptions. There is a myriad of supply chain disruptions out there today and potential supply chain disruptions. We're going to talk about some of the top ones. We would like this to be interactive, so if you're having supply chain disruptions that we haven't talked about, please bring it up and ask questions about it. I'm so serious about this being an interactive session today that I am giving away my Monday night drink coupons to the first people that ask questions. All right, that's how serious I am about this.
You don't understand the sacrifice that is.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm going to end up buying my own drinks, people. So that's how important this is to me.
Hey, Jeff, can we just go to the summer?
First question. No, that doesn't count, JT. That doesn't count. We're going to talk about risk mitigation strategy execution, right? This is how you do it. This is the what do I do section, and obviously the summary. All right, so we're going to start off, right? Risk is everywhere in our lives, right? Risk is inherent to everything that we do, right? And we put a picture up here of a person falling down the stairs. it may not be the most appropriate, but risk cannot be eliminated, right? The only way to eliminate risk is to eliminate the situation. So in this example, right, the only way to eliminate the risk of falling downstairs is to take out the stairs, right? But there are risk mitigation strategies that you can employ to mitigate the risk of falling down the stairs. Who has one example of a risk mitigation strategy for helping reduce the risk of falling down the stairs?
Elevator.
There you go. Well, that absolutely will do it. Anybody else?
Handrails.
Handrails. There you go. Right? Maybe put some non-stickum on the stair, or to increase. Those are risk mitigation strategies. So the thing that we want you to understand is that risk cannot be reduced. It can only be mitigated, right? Unless you completely remove the risk, like taking out the stairs and putting in an elevator, right? You have to understand that concept before you go through the rest, right? Because people talk about, and you'll hear people talk about, we're going to eliminate risk, we're going to reduce risk. No, you don't reduce it, you mitigate it, right? You put a plan in place to mitigate it. So that's just kind of a quick little thing about risk.
Hey Jeff, I got a question.
Okay.
That's for interactive, and I don't need your drink.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about risk mitigation and you're going in and you're looking at warehouse automation and you're looking to automate facilities, you go into a place, senior executive says, I need to mitigate as much risk as possible. I cannot be down at all. Zero downtime, no risk mitigation. Computers, we know, go down. How do you go into that organization and try to convince that you're always going to have some level of risk in automating your facility? You've got to be able to take some of that risk on as an organization. How do you approach that individual that says zero risk, I can't be down ever, my customers can't afford it?
Right. Well, that's a great question, JT. That's skipping to slide 5, but that's okay. So Al is the perfect person to answer that question, because Al had a highly automated facility when I met him, and brought in all kinds of new technology.
Yep. I stepped into a role, and the company just bought a $20 million automated system. We nicknamed the beast because it was atrocious. That's when I was on your side of the fence. So I picked up the phone, started doing a search, and I found, back at the time, Waller and Associates. And I hired Jeff and Dan, and that's how we met. So I'm a former customer that got so enamored with the process, Jeff invited me to join the team. The site I had, and I was thinking of the one we were working on earlier this year, where you've got so much automation, so many opportunities for failure. You've got to do a risk assessment on where are my points of failure, okay? Controls, computers, mechanical items, and you have to get in the room. You have to get in a room before it breaks and have a conversation on where are my threats to the operation? Is that a low threat or a high threat? What's the lead time for this mechanism? If this thing's a year, I better have one on the shelf. If it's 2 days, I'll trust FedEx, okay? But you've got to get in a room and talk about all of your opportunities and pain points, and then decide what are you going to keep on the shelf? What are your service agreements with different vendors? If you don't do that and that thing, whatever it is, breaks, and you pick up the phone and find out you're 3 or 4 months out, you're in trouble, okay? So you do those things. But something else we did, and we did actually partner with these guys, is we found manual processes. Now, you can't always do that, especially in very complex environments, but you always make sure you have a backup plan, and you test your backup plan. So you identify your spare parts, critical spare parts. You keep them on the shelf. You make sure you contact key vendors, service vendors. Hey, I'm going to pay for that service, so you're same day, next day. If you don't do that, when it breaks and you're scrambling, you're really in trouble. And I've seen that happen. So that's what you have to do. And I think it's coming up on the slide, but a process we used to use in the shops I've always run was called Think Winter. So please remember that. It's when things are going well, think winter. In spring, think winter. In summer, think winter. Get in a room and go, what could go wrong? and start thinking about it. Because when it does go wrong, you will at least have some thoughts about it. So that's a long answer to a short question, but that's the kind of things you have to do. And you have to do it before it breaks. You have to do it before you have to, or you're in trouble, and then your customers are going to be unhappy. I mean, the operational and business risk is amazing. One shop I ran once was printing, and what I printed at night allowed American Airlines to fly the next morning. You talk about having backup plans, because if that paper wasn't in that briefcase, the pilot couldn't get on the plane. What's the risk? You know, so we had redundant equipment, we had redundant people. There's things you have to do. So you have to measure your risk. Long answer, sorry.
That's all right. So, so that's one example of operational risk. And one of the things we're going to talk about now are the types of supply chain risk, right? So supply chain touches virtually everything, and you guys know that, right? So there's the operational risks that we just discussed, compliance risks, you know, and these are global, right? I mean, the Fuel EU, right, that just went into effect this year, right? I mean, vessels have to show a 5% performance increase in their efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction, or they get fined, you know, in a European port, right? That just went into effect. And by 2030, it has to be a 55% decrease, right? And so things like that, not only here in the US, and, you know, everybody's talking about tariffs and all those things, and all of that's real, but there's other things going on along your supply chain that could impact you just as much as a tariff if you're getting fined every time one of your ships get pulled into port, right? Environmental risks, right? Epidemics, you know, is that going to happen again? You know, pandemics, are those things going to happen again? Well, if they do, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to do something much better if you're prepared for it than if you're not, right? And you're assessing the risk of that. Financial risks, obviously the tariffs and those types of things. But there's interest rates, right? There's the global economics, right? There's different currencies that have issues all over the world, right? And so there's a lot of financial risks, strategic risks, and security risks, right? If you have facilities outside the country, how do you protect those? Cybersecurity is a huge issue globally for large companies. You know, so there's several different types of risks, and the reason we bring those up is it's not just the risk of your operational processes, right? It's all the other risks that need to be assessed, addressed, and put a plan in place, right? Do you guys have anything?
I think, you know, one of the things when you're talking about the operation itself, I remember when I took over an operation, and when I walked into it, there was a high elevation roller conveyances, and I just looked and said, like, that's a nightmare. If the system goes down, how are you going to move? It's highly automated, multiple mezzanines, and it's like the pack out was up at the top, it wasn't down at the bottom. I mean, you can do things like just design a facility to where if I have to cut a belt and I've got rollers, gravity will take it down the bottom of the roller. So it's things like that you have to think about when you're doing it. And that's what you have to have the expertise with people that know how to do that. But simple things like that, I just like, well, if this belt goes down, we're in trouble because I have no way of getting these parts. Mm-hmm. But if it had been, you know, at a different incline and laid out a different way, I could cut the belt and use rollers and move the product along.
Right. All these things to be thought of before that contract
Correct.
is signed, right?
That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit. So the types of supply chain, we just discussed the types of supply chain risks. Now we're getting into what to do, right? So the next step is after you identify your risks, is assessing them, right? And you assess them two ways. You look at the likelihood that they're going to happen, which is completely independent of the impact that it's going to have to your organization, right? So every accounting firm out there, the big five accounting firms, right, they sell all kinds of services, I know because I used to do it at Ernst & Young, around coming into your operation, assessing the likelihood and impact of the risks in all of those different categories of supply chain risk, and then putting together a matrix so that you can use that matrix to put together a mitigation plan for those risks, right? But these are the two ways that risk is assessed. And it's a critical step in putting together that plan.
You know, to that point, before you write that seven-figure check to the accounting firm, talk to your maintenance lead, talk to your team leads, talk to your people on the floor and ask them what keeps you up at night. Well, if this thing breaks, we're hosed. It's just astounding the amount of data you can gather from the people that are actually touching the product as opposed to somebody sitting in an office. So go to the people and say, what keeps you up at night? And they'll tell you. It's a great place. I mean, you can start tomorrow. That's the beauty of this conversation. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to call anybody. Go back home, get your folks in a room, and think winter. What could go wrong? Talk to your people doing the job. They'll give you things that you need to go, I hadn't thought of that.
Right. Yeah, so think of the most critical process in your supply chain, whether it be distribution operations or transportation or overseas manufacturing or whatever it is in your supply chain. Pick one area and put together a group of people that actually work in that area, identify the processes that are at risks in that area, and put together a risk matrix, right? It's a fantastic discussion to have, especially with people that are knee-deep in it every day, right? They have day jobs. I can't take them out of their role. They're too busy. You know what? Do it over several one-hour sessions or 30-minute sessions, and you will be amazed what kind of information you get out of that as far as what your risk matrix is going to look like for that process, and even more amazed on the solutions and mitigation strategies that are going to come out of it, things you would have never thought of, right? So put together a risk matrix for one process. Just start with one, right? If a process, you know, the likelihood is very high, but the impact of it is low, so what, right? It's low. You probably don't need to put a risk strategy together, a risk mitigation strategy around it. But if it's medium and it's a high likelihood of happening, you know, you have a high likelihood of your supply chain being impacted by that, and you need a risk mitigation strategy for that process. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, when we would come into an organization, and you know, most of our clients were, you know, Fortune 500 clients at Ernst & Young, that is the process that we would go through for each and every critical process within your supply chain. And you can do it yourself because you already have the experts in-house to do it. You just need to know the methodology to go through to put that together. Guys, any thoughts?
I wish we had more than 45 minutes.
Right, right.
Not to bore you to death, but there's so much to talk about. I mean, 5 years ago, wasn't that fun? You know, there's more things coming. And we've got to get in the room, and pull your team together and have a conversation. I mean, this next slide is it's just one example of, you know, what could go wrong. This is, you know, just the routing difference based off of what's happening over in the Middle East and all now. I mean, the 30-40% lead time increase, cost increase. That's just one example of 100 examples. I mean, watch the news. It'll keep you up at night. And that's our job. Our job is to take a look at that and mitigate risk. And it's coming up on a future slide, but and Jeff just mentioned it, you got to get in the room and pick a subject. First thing you have to do is, what all could go wrong? Oh my God, there's 100 Post-it notes on the wall. Well, what are the top few? Okay, let's talk those top few. Let's have a conversation about it. At least have a conversation about it, okay? Remember when COVID first hit, we're all watching the news going, something happened in Seattle, somebody got off a plane. Next thing you know, we're shutting everything down. Next thing you know, containers are $20,000 a piece in premium. Wasn't that fun, you know? There's something else coming. It may be something that grand and global. It could be your shop, that belt breaking, and you're in trouble. So get in a room, have a conversation, think about it.
So Doug, in your transportation operations, I mean, this one's armed conflict, right? You have to look at things globally, right?
Yeah.
All over for Ford Motor Company.
Sure.
And, what types of things do you and your team focus on around the global risk mitigation?
There's a couple that we look. We've partnered with Project 44, who has great visibility into this. They're giving us AI leading information. Hey, this is happening. You have these shipments are potentially at risk, right? So that information now is becoming available to us like it's never had before. So having that information and allowing us to see it, react on it, not waiting 45 days to be impacted, we're trying to make changes around that. I think you also have to think about the risk mitigation as a resiliency, right? Because once something fails, you're going to pay an exponential factor of that. It's just say a 10x factor, right? You may spend, I'm just going to use a number, $100,000 to do something, but if it fails, it's going to cost you $1 million. So that cost factor has to come into this, that resiliency. So, one of the things that I did is I said, why aren't we using air cargo, right? It's the out, it's a valve. In case something does happen, I've got an out now. Yeah, I'm spending a little bit more money, but when I need that valve, it's there.
Yeah.
I can move product now, and I've got a dedicated lane that I'm on every week. Yeah, it's no big deal right now. Like, why are we spending that money? But the first time something happens, I'm glad we got that, and it's already happened. Where we had parts that were held up in customs, and we were able to fly them. So you got to start thinking like that. Like, what are those that matrix, and what's going to have an impact, and what's the cost if I do have a failure?
And we haven't rehearsed this yet, but make sure it's not just executives and accounting in a room making these decisions. They'll go down this road. You better
Exactly.
have your ops people in there. You better have your customer service people in, your sales people in there, okay? Because, costs are up 12%. I don't care. Because if I didn't have that thing on the shelf or that valve coming in, the cost and the lead time is ridiculous. You make sure the business is represented in these conversations and listen to your negative worriers, okay? Listen to them. Listen to them and go, that thing, I always thought that thing would break or that this would happen. So sometimes you pay a little to avoid paying a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of disruptions out there, right? Trade conflict. We're not going to read you all these slides, right? These are all going to be made available to you after the conference. So we're not going to stand up here and read slides to you. But all the trade conflict that's out there now, it's a huge problem, right, in the global supply chain, and it's not getting better, right? So if you don't have a strategy to work with trade conflict and to mitigate that risk, you're going to need one soon. Changing regulations. I mean, I mentioned the Fuel EU earlier, but there's a lot of that going on right now, right? Different countries have different priorities. Different regions have different priorities, and the regulations are not decreasing on supply chain, especially in the transportation world. Weather events, right? They never go away. All right, they're always there. Weather events are constant, and you would be amazed how many people don't have a plan to deal with weather events, right? Future pandemics, right? What's to say the next one's not right around the corner? And I'm not trying to be a naysayer, right? But I'm talking about risk mitigation. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to deal with that again. But what are you going to do, right? You need to be ready for it, and you need to be resilient. All right, so I tried to skip through the disruptions quickly so we could get to the so what do we do portion of it, right? In your organizations, you have to figure out who owns risk and threat assessment, right? So, someone in your organization, if you have a large enough organization, you might have a chief risk officer or that sort of thing. If you don't have a risk officer, a lot of the times it falls on like the COO or the CFO, that sort of thing. It falls under their group. But you have to have a conversation with who owns it, because if nobody owns it, nothing will get done, right? Just like anything else. Make it part of your strategic planning process, right? Risk assessment, not only the assessment step, right? That's just a step, but the risk mitigation plan development and incorporating it into a plan that everybody knows about and it's been communicated is paramount to make it happen. We talked about this 2 or 3 times. Talk to your team about it, right? Your team has more ideas than you do. They're in the thick of things, and they're going to come up with solutions that you don't, or the executive or finance people don't. And again, to Al's point, think winner, right? Even in good times, you got to have a plan for when things aren't going to be so good, right?
When things are good, that's when you want to go test some.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the time you want to try to do this stuff and go, what about this? What if we
Yeah.
did that? Not when it actually happens.
Right. Develop what-if scenarios. That's a great thing that teams come up with, what-if scenarios, right? What if this happens? What if that happens, right? Map your supply chain. Seems simple, but it's so many companies don't have their supply chain mapped. We'll go in and the first conversation we have is, show me a map of your supply chain. Oh, well, we have this and we have that, and we don't have a map of our end-to-end supply chain. Build one, because as in the process of building one, you will learn more about your supply chain, and your team, whether it's your executive team or your management team, will learn a lot about your supply chain operations. Yes, sir.
Could you just talk a little bit more about what a supply chain map would entail? Like, what does that include?
Yeah, absolutely. And you get a drink ticket for that. So a supply chain map, right? It can be simply a diagram of step-by-step process. So say if you're a product company, right? A step-by-step process of where all of your raw materials come from, the first step in the buying process. If they're consolidated, if they go to a manufacturing facility to be built into components or whatever. But it's simply a picture of step-by-step process of from raw material to component manufacturing to assembly, and the transportation and distribution steps in between each of those. If you have partners that do that, second tier or third tier partners that handle those things for you, that gets mapped in it as well. But as a sequential from start to finished good sale and transportation to your customer, what that picture looks like. So if you have a complex manufacturing operations that has, parts that come from all over the world that get sub-assemblies and assembled like an auto manufacturing plant, it may take up that entire back wall, right? But not everybody's supply chain is that complex. Maybe you have, a more simple supply chain where you have a few components that then get assembled and then packaged and shipped to a customer, right? But it's that complete picture of from raw material sourcing to finished goods transportation to the customer. And then if you have reverse logistics, that reverse process as well.
It's a comment. I'm an automotive guy from way back. If you guys work with Lean or Lean Enterprise, just a process map, I have done this with a white roll of paper and Post-it notes. It's amazing what you don't know. It's amazing what I think I know, and then you go, you forgot this. And then JT goes, what about this? And then you're moving all this around. Sometimes it's as easy as just getting in a room together. Or it can be like an Excel, just a process flow chart. If you want to blow your executive's mind, get a map and map your supply chain. And talk about, because the side benefit of this is, why do I touch that 20 times, right?
Absolutely.
Waste elimination. That's just a side benefit. But the other part is, well, crap, all of this goes through that country. Have you watched the news lately? What are we going to do if? What are we going to do if China does Taiwan? What are we going to do if something happens? What are we going to do? So it can be a simple process map on the wall. It could be in Excel or whatever tool you want to use, a process map. But take your most complex ones and grab your data analyst. You've all got them. We've all got them. The young person that just loves it. And say, put this on a map for me. And then talk about lead time at each point. It'll scare you to death. It really will. But you have to do it.
Yeah, for my team, I can tell you, every one of my suppliers, I can tell you what port they're going to come into. I can tell you the number of volumes coming in every day.
Yep.
There's maps that overlay on top of this. I can go layers deep if I want to. When I came into this role, we looked at what does the whole transportation network look like. And we actually found there was like, we were doing intermediary steps, going to another place to consolidate the ship. And I'm like, why are we doing that? And nobody, well, that's the way we've always done it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Why aren't you shipping direct, right? First of all, you're saving fuel, you're saving costs, you get the product there, you're reducing inventory, all these other things. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. And that's what happens coming out of these sessions, like
Absolutely.
mapping this stuff out and saying like, what is that?
But if you're not Ford, their budget's bigger than some of our companies, right? My shops I ran, I made sure twice a year, we had a strategic planning meeting, okay? And we at least had the conversations. And it's a small version of exactly what Doug's doing. But you have to have an understanding. You have to listen, you have to map, you have to ask questions, and you can't blow it off that it's going to be okay, because it's not going to be okay. Our job is to mitigate risk, okay? In operations, you're either getting yelled at by customer service or yelled at by accounting, right? Come on, ops people. Until you quit shipping, then the whole world comes after you, okay? And they're not going to say, well, I put it in the budget, you didn't let me have it. They don't care. What are you doing about it? Our job is to fix it anyway. Our job is to mitigate it anyway. So you can do that without spending a lot of money, or you can grow into it, but you have to do it. You have to have the conversation.
I agree. I know you gotta-
Yeah, I was just kind of diving deeper into your supplier, their suppliers. Do you dive down that path?
Not my part of the business. I would say there's a lot of challenges in the industry in that perspective, right? And there's a lot of good solutions that are coming out there. You've got to be able to see wherever, if you're going down 5 levels, you've got to be able to see all of it. You've got to understand what their throughput capacity is, and you've got to monitor that on a daily basis, because something, if you're at a tier 2 or tier 3, it may be 6 weeks before that actually hits your inventory. I would want to know that moment that there's a potential risk there. What am I doing to mitigate it 6 weeks ahead of time, instead of like, oh, we're not going to make it, because then you're dead.
Yeah, by the time the delivery doesn't show up, you've lost 6 weeks that you could have been coming up with a backup plan.
I mean, you really need to have those conversations to say.
You-
where are
absolutely.
pulling that from?
Absolutely.
Because that's
Again,
what's-
not my part of the business, but I would be looking at it, I would be looking at my suppliers' throughput every single day. What was their plan? What was the actual? And you will start to see snowballs starting to happen.
So curious from an IMDS perspective, how is that helping you from a transparency perspective?
So again, nothing from a supplier perspective for me, right? So I don't do anything with that. But from a transportation perspective, I'm always looking at my carrier's capacity and saying, where are you at right now? I looked at little simple things, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, little simple things that you do every day. And if you do them very well, it gives you a lot of information. But I look and see what my tender acceptance rate is every single day. I'm looking at it by lane, by carrier, and it's a leading indicator that something's bad starting to happen. So being able to dive into that and get into granular levels to see that.
Yeah.
Back in the corner.
Rent new vehicles like EV, right? Do you start this supply chain process at that time? At your R&D, the very beginning?
I didn't hear the,
process?
Yeah,
I didn't hear the
like
question.
for EV vehicles,
Yeah.
like
New
looking,
development.
right, new development.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're going to start moving things. Like, so for us moving batteries, battery packs, which are imagine the bottom of an F-150, right? That is one big battery, right? To move that is a challenge. So we're still working through this process because we weren't necessarily there at the beginning, like I was talking about, right? So it's like, I've got to go clean this up now. How do I deal with this? So you've got to get involved very early on. You've got to co-collaborate with your other teammates. I cannot emphasize that enough. The co-collaboration is extremely important.
Yeah, you guys, you have to get to the grown-up table, okay? If it's just sales and design and research coming up with this stuff, if operations is not in the room, you're not designing for manufacturing. Well, that's great, but I can't build it. That's great, but I can't source it. So you got to get buy-in from the top that's great, but we better talk about execution, because at the end of the day, when everybody's done, we're executing for the next 10 years. So you've got to make sure at the beginning, you have the right people in the room asking the right questions. But it's not that operations wants to limit anything, but you certainly want to make sure you can execute and live with it when you're done.
Would it be valuable to do the supply, the process map at that time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Make sure
That is
everybody-
the time to do it.
That's exactly when you do it, because then you can go, well, that's a great idea, marketing or R&D, but it's going to cause this to happen with our supply chain.
Yeah.
If you could tweak it, we could cut out I'm making this up, you know what I mean? Get in a room and figure it out. But do it at the beginning when it's data, not hard goods.
And if you do it at the beginning, especially like the map the supply chain piece of it, right? Do it at the beginning. You're going to have so many aha moments. I didn't know we even did that. I didn't even know that step even existed. Oh yeah, we've done that for the last 20 years, type of thing. But it's not always that way, right? I mean, you're going to learn more about your supply chain by sitting down and mapping it, whether you're a small organization or a huge organization like Ford, right? And that will get you to asking questions about, well, what risks exist here in this step? What risks, we get all of this from China, right? What if, the tariffs go through the roof in China and it's not affordable anymore, right? We can't get it from India. We can't get it from Indonesia, because we don't have any suppliers there yet. And it kind of goes to the last point, and I'm not trying to just get through slides, but everyone you'll see has that last point on it, right? Diversify your regional and geographical sourcing. You get sick of hearing that, right? But it's true. You need to have some sort of risk mitigation strategy if you're sourcing all of your product from one geography, right? Even if it's just getting it from Mexico to the US, even if it's a neighboring country, there are risks associated with that. So take the time to do it. That bottom point is hard. It's hard. Everybody knows it's hard, or they would have already done it. But it's important in a supply chain risk mitigation strategy to have alternate sourcing that's not in the same geography, right? And I get batteries, right?
I'll
Batteries are only made,
Yeah,
right?
great.
Right.
I'll share with you, when I was in my consulting world, a large retailer of women's handbags, and I learned more about handbags than I ever should have in my life. They actually had a really good program where they would take a supplier who was their top supplier, and they would cut inventory away from, production away from them to another level, what they called an intermediary, and then just a beginner, in different parts of the world. So they're actually building up their supply chain base without disrupting their business. I thought it was brilliant when they were doing it. I was like, this is incredible. This is what companies should be doing.
Yeah. So are there any questions on this? We're gonna move into a little bit more detail about what to do next, but I want to just kind of pause here. We've only got 5 more minutes, so we're going to have to wrap it up here soon. I have 2 drink coupons left, so.
He would hate to keep those.
That's right. Then I'm going to have to use them, and that's all. Any other questions before we? Okay.
Yes, sir. We have a question.
Yes.
Well, we are Dutch, so we're always looking for a free drink.
Understood, yes.
I really have a question too. We are trying to help companies to set up an operation in the Netherlands, and I was just wondering, are there risks for a US company doing business in Europe for that matter? Basically the same, or are there any other risks involved for the company?
So that's a general question, right, for operating in Europe, right? I wouldn't say just the Netherlands in general. Right. In my experience with companies that I've worked with that had U.S. and European operations, operating in Europe is different than operating in the U.S., no doubt. The regulations are different. Real estate is different. Development is different. Labor is different. And so what it takes to bring a U.S. corporation into the Netherlands or really into Western Europe as a whole, or even parts of Eastern Europe, is you have to have a good local presence. to help you and plan that out, right? It is risky to do that because the operations and the environment that you're working in is completely different than the U.S.
Jeff,
Mark, you can answer that, right? You've done a lot of work in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Jeff uses a term in our consulting, and that's tour guide. You need a tour guide for things like that. You need somebody that's been there, done that, because you cannot afford to figure it out on your own. You will waste time and money. So you do need somebody, some expert to help you, guide you through that. And it's going to be less physical, but it's kind of the compliance, the legal, the regulatory, the financial.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
It's a risk mitigation strategy.
Absolutely.
Right. So to mitigate the risk for a company, if you're trying to attract people to the Netherlands, a risk mitigation strategy is to have someone like yourself who's local, who understands local regulations, local working environment, local labor environment, all of that, maybe a local consulting company that can be their tour guide and give them assurance that everything's going to be handled, because a U.S. firm going over there that hasn't done it before doesn't know what they don't know, right? And so that's the risk to them, is they don't know what they don't know. So they have to be reassured that things aren't going to go astray, and they're going to end up spending 50% more on a facility or whatever that you're putting in there to do that.
Well, I wish we had more time. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I know ever since the COVID 2020 impact, we have been in constant, perennial state of crisis in supply chain. So how frequently would you recommend to kind of refresh that likelihood impact risk matrix?
Yeah, so we always recommend once a year. Make it an annual process, an annual review. If something happens in the supply chain, review that process right then, right? I'm not talking about the whole plan. I'm talking about if something happens in transportation, or you have to employ some of the risk mitigation strategies that alternate plans, if you will. If you have to employ those, take another look at it right then. Don't wait for that annual assessment. But the whole supply chain risk assessment should be done once a year.
This is something, don't have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting.
Yeah, please don't.
We had our meeting, yay, we wrote it down, yay, we're going to ignore it for 6 months. If you have this risk mitigation conversation, if you identify these risks, if you identify these weaknesses in your supply chain, do something about it, okay? You leave that meeting with notes. The next week, do something. When I met Dan and Jeff, was it Tuesday? I had my weekly fix-it meeting. It's amazing what you can do with a pizza and a half dozen people in a room. So if you have the strategy meeting and you identify these opportunities for improvement, do something about it the next week and then the next week. And we used to set ourselves a goal to do at least one thing a week, fix one thing, mitigate one thing. So every 6 months, once a year, absolutely. Don't wait 12 months to revisit it. It's got to stay alive, because risk is alive. Risk is out there. It's knocking on our door. So don't wait for it to run you over. So if you have the meeting, do something about it.
So this is a risk mitigation execution. This is step by step, obviously in a very general format. Not going to go through this with you, but if you download it or take a picture of it, whatever you want to do, this is kind of step by step, right? And we put a few things in here. I know we're out of time, and I apologize for that, but I want you to take a look at some of these things in here as well. But the key takeaways, right? Map and monitor your supply chain. You'll learn so much from that. Diversify your suppliers and regions. Harder or easier said than done, but do it. Use technology for visibility and agility, right? AI is an incredible thing. This is not about AI. You'll hear it in every other session, but this one. But learn about AI, learn how you can use it in your operations. It's an incredible thing. I'm still learning it myself, so I'm not the expert. Build strong supplier partnerships. Integrate risk into strategy and planning in every type of planning that you do, strategic planning that you do, right? Risk is everywhere. It's your choice, right? Resilience is optional. That came from when I ran this presentation through an AIA program. So.
Sounds like Star Trek, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. Any more questions? I have one drink coupon left. Oh, there we go.
We have a winner.
All right.
So, I'm asking this question from a perspective of network design. So, how do we deal with the volatility in terms of the trucking prices when we, try to make our estimates for the next year? We recently in our organization found a discrepancy between what we budgeted for the last year and how the expenses were incurred, specifically in terms of micron costs.
Well, that's a great question. You guys have an answer?
I didn't hear all of it, I'm sorry.
Okay.
How do you budget for these things? Is
Yeah.
that what it came down to?
Yeah.
That's back to getting in a room together, okay? Have finance in the room. You may have to budget for a little extra air freight to make sure you got those valves coming in, okay? You've got to recognize that you pay me now or pay me later. That's what it comes down to. So you've got to build that in the budget. Hey, we might have container premiums. Hey, we might have a geopolitical issue over here. And you got to if you don't put it in the budget, you're gonna have the expense and you got to take it from somewhere else. So the finance may not like it during the profit planning, but you got to at least talk about it. At your house, you've got a contingency, right? In your own home budget, you got some contingency in case something breaks. You got to do it at the corporate level, or you're going to write the check anyway.
But it's much easier to get that in the budget if you've done a risk assessment.
Yep.
And you've put together mitigation plans. You can take those plans to your budgeting process, to your finance group and say, hey, look, if we have a very high likelihood that this is going to happen, this is our plan, and if we do have to implement this plan, this is how much more it's going to cost. We have to go around the Horn of Africa instead of going through the Straits, right? It's going to cost this much more to go around the Horn of Africa. Those types of things, you can actually put a dollar amount on, and people understand why you need more money in the budget for risk mitigation strategies.
I wish we had more time. Thank you guys for your questions.
Yeah,
This is
thank you very
fantastic.
much. Appreciate it. This is our information. If you have any more questions or if you want to send us an email or whatever, we will certainly be happy to answer any other questions you guys have.
Absolutely.